Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will start. Then, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for coming to discuss the development of the possibilities methodology for the monitoring and impact assessment in the face of unilateral sanctions means of the enforcement and over-compliance as regard the human rights. I would also like especially thank my panelists, His Excellency Mr. William Castillo, the Vice Minister of Anti-Blockade Policies of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and His Excellency Mr. Juan Antonio Quintanilla Roman, the Ambassador of Cuba, who agreed to come today and to share the experience of their countries in developing the different types of monitoring and analysis of sanctions regimes and impact of sanctions regimes today. The issue of monitoring of the humanitarian impact of unilateral sanctions means of the enforcement and over-compliance is extremely complicated because no real methodology ever existed, and it's very complicated to adapt any methodology or any assessment to the sanctions environment, which develops extremely fast. And therefore, we face an incredible discrepancy in assessment. As you were able to notice during the ID last Friday, the many countries which impose sanctions deny the existence of the humanitarian impact. At the same time, I believe that to be able to depoliticize the issue of sanctions and to follow the evidence-based approach, it's very important to develop the methodology and to be able to identify clearly what is the exact humanitarian impact to provide the victims of human rights violations due to sanctions-induced consequences with the possibility for remedy, responsibility, and redress in the specific situation. That's why since 2 years, my mandate was working on the development of the methodology and the monitoring tool. And I would like to use the chance to thank all countries and all non-governmental actors who ever took part in the development of the tool and methodology, as well as in the expert consultations. Therefore, I will explain the agenda of our meeting today. Our respected panelists will have up to 10 minutes for presentation of the methodologies developed and used within Venezuela and within Cuba. Afterwards, I will present the monitoring tool developed by the mandate by this moment. And after that, there will be a possibility for interventions from the ground within 2, maximum 3 minutes, with priority naturally given to states. And at the very end, I will give 2 minutes to each of the panelists for follow-up to have the possibility to respond questions if they are coming or to make some final statements. So without any further delays, I am happy to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. William Castillo, the Vice Minister of Anti-Blockade Policies of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Please, the floor is.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Excellency, for this invitation. Thank you, Excellency, Ambassador of Cuba, and all of you for being here present. Allow me in this 9 minutes to summarize 3 years of research on unilateral coercive measures in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Before these comments, I want to thank you on behalf of President Nicolás Maduro for this invitation to participate in the context of this session of the Human Rights Council. We all know that the sanctions, the unilateral sanctions and coercive measures, unilateral coercive measures are illegal, established by the UN itself. Since 2014, Venezuela started having a series of measures in this regard. Measures that go against its economy, that has impeded the trade of oil. That's the main source, our main foreign source of income. We've had the frozen of more than $30 billion in the international financial system. There's a legal measure in the United States on the President of the Republic There is a measure of the Department of Justice of the United States that has put a price of $15 million as a warrant to have information to the judgment or detention of President of Venezuela.
Gravísimo.
This is something deeply concerning that is unprecedented in our history. Along the same lines, Venezuela has been impeded from the last 10 years on the access to medicine, the access to medication, and even during the pandemic and the beginning of the pandemic, we had to block the access to the COVAX system, bringing about a huge damage to the population of our country. So Venezuela has received 947 unilateral coercive measures. And in our methodology, we've included a new category, which are restrictive or punitive measures. On this methodology and the steps taken by the Venezuelan state to research, document, and contribute to the international knowledge of this work is what I want to refer to.
2020.
In 2000, the year 2000, Venezuela adopted a law, which is the constitutional law anti-blockade for the national development and the guarantees of human rights. The name of the law defines its objective and goal. It has two main goals. Thinking about the fact that it dealt with an aggression against the whole Venezuelan state, against its authorities, against its economy. The objective of this law is to protect the state, the population, the territory, and the Venezuelan institutions. And for the development of this law, the Venezuelan legislators were raised in the documents and resolutions drafted by the United Nations. This was the original basis to develop the law. So Venezuela adopts a definition of unilateral coercive measures. And in our anti-blockade law, we do not recognize jurisprudence nor any legality to any measure that aims to restrict the rights of the Venezuelan people or affect the life of the Venezuelan state and people. We do not recognize the validity, legal validity, to any measure that is not adopted by the UN Security Council, established in the legislation and resolutions in the United Nations. And of course, this is something that hasn't happened in the case of Venezuela for the last 10 years. The state also brings about two categories: unilateral coercive measures that are equivalent to unilateral sanctions, and other measures that come directly or indirectly from these measures by action or omission, and that goes to the effects of unilateral coercive measures. In this regard, and for you to have an example of this, Venezuela considers that all the blockages to our accounts in international banks are restrictive measures and punitive measures because they impede the well-functioning of the Venezuelan state. As I told you, Venezuela has more than $30 billion that are blocked in 29 international banks, mainly in the United States and in Europe. They incorporate these restriction measures as a tax. Venezuela also includes the aggressions against our diplomatic corps. Our diplomats all over the world are being excluded from the financial system, impeding their daily activity, violating the rights to pay and feed their families in complying with their activities. We also include these measures against the diplomatic as restrictive measures on the Venezuelan state because they represent the Venezuelan state. As I said, we've developed a methodology based mainly on the discussions and debates in the United Nations, in resolutions, and in the reports. And I want to recognize here on behalf of the government of Venezuela the important work carried out by the special rapporteur created by the mandate of the Human Rights Council, led by Dr. Elena Duhan, who visited our country and could see firsthand the impacts of unilateral coercive measures and has drafted reports that have been referenced to the Venezuelan state according to its visions and its analytic measure and concept measures of unilateral coercive measures.
La aprobación de la ley,
Giving the approval of the law, we had two institutions. The one was the Productive Investment Center, which is a new institution dedicated to promote investments and economic projects in Venezuela that are aiming to support international investors that can be affected by the blockade.
hemos logrado ya en estos 3
And in these last 3 years, we have managed to have some success and support, and we have been able to bring about investors to Venezuela. And then we created the Venezuelan Observatory Anti-Blockade that I represent, and that has developed this work. This is public work. It is online, and all the Venezuelan database is available. So by supporting these sorts of events, Venezuela is having its commitment
entre los cuales destaca el
with the joint work within for example, we have the work of the group of friends to promote this discussion in the United Nations. And we believe that multilateralism has a lot to say and a lot to act to mitigate and eliminate these illegal policies of the peoples of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Juan Castillo Quintanilla Roman, the Ambassador of Cuba. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, esteemed Special Rapporteur. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you and the audience, and as well to the Vice Minister of Anti-Blocking Policies of the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this event and to share our experience in the development of a methodology that has allowed us to measure the economic impact of the blockade that the government of the United States has kept on us for over 6 decades. Before saying this, Special Rapporteur, I want to recognize your professional work that you have carried out during the last 4 years to make visible the impact of unilateral coercive measures, not only in the countries that are victim, but also in third countries, and in many cases, in the countries that impose sanctions themselves. I mentioned before that for more than 6 decades, Cuba has been the victim of a most severe and prolonged system of unilateral coercive measures. That's an economic, commercial, financial blockade that goes amounting to $164,141,000,000 if we take into account the performance on the dollar against the value of the gold on the international market. This figure would have increased to more than $1,499,710,000,000. You can have a clear image of what this figure represents for the economy, trade, and the development of a developing nation, a small Caribbean island, as is the case of Cuba. For you to have an idea, between March 2023 and February 2024, the blockade caused material damages to Cuba of $5 billion. In a single year, in 1 year, more than $5 billion. And it's estimated that if the blockade has not, we could see that if we would not have been victims of this blockade of the United States, the GDP of Cuba at current prices would have grown by 2023 in 8%. This gives a great impact that the blockade measures have against our country. So how has Cuba been able to calculate this material year of the blockade? Cuba has a legal framework that has a few more years than that has been promoted by that of our Venezuelan brothers. Our legal our legal framework, that is a decree, was adopted by the year 2012, a decade ago, more than a decade ago. And this process of estimation of the impact of the blockade is driven by the Ministry of Economy and Planning of the Republic of Cuba, and there are a lot of ministries and political government and government institutions of Cuba that are directly linked to all the activity of the country. So this methodology, Cuba could present to the world a national report on the effects of the blockade. For those that are interested in looking for more details in this regard, that last week, on September 13th, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba presented to the diplomatic corps in Cuba and the national press and international press in Cuba the most recent report. And this report not only was presented to the world, but it was also a report sent by Cuba to the Secretary General of the United Nations in response to the request of information that is done after every year the General Assembly adopts, with the vast majority of support of the international community. We adopt a resolution that asks the Secretary General to draft a report on the blockade. So this report of the blockade is the answer of Cuba to the request of the Secretary General. Going to Article 5 of Decree 290, which is the one that goes the methodologies, we believe that damages and loss caused by the blockade are considered to be those resulting from the application of measures of an extraterritorial nature, political pressure, or any other type of pressure exerted by the U.S. government to hinder or prevent Cuba from conducting commercial operations and economic transactions derived from cooperation projects and financial investments, that they prevent access to technology and knowledge, or cause damage to production and services, or other damages. The recording of information and the calculation of the damages is carried out by 7 big groups, and I will comment what these groups do. The first group, Group 1, is in charge of reporting damages caused by the impossibility of accessing the U.S. market, transactions with subsidiaries of U.S. companies based in third countries, because the blockade also affects companies that are located in third countries or from third countries that have merged with U.S. companies or interests or U.S. interests, and those derived from the extraterritorial application of U.S. laws or provisions that have an impact on export. Group 2 takes into account the rising prices of imported products and services vis-a-vis the price of similar products and services from U.S. companies and those located in third countries to which Cuban companies do not have access to. In addition, the cost of insurance, the freight, and the increase in prices due to the need to use intermediaries for their acquisition are also taken into account. In Group 3, they analyze the damages to production and services due to the impossibility of procuring spare parts, raw materials, and products whose specifications cannot be replaced by any other supplier, as well as delays in substitution or other causes that affect production and services. Considering the values of goods and services that are no longer produced for this reason. Group 4 supervises the damages caused by the impossibility of using the U.S. currency in financial transactions of all kinds, including the exchange rate variations with regards to the currencies that the country is forced to use and the resulting bank charges of these operations. Group 5 includes the damages to the population due to various causes related to the blockade, including unpaid income from artistic performances, royalties, cash prices, inheritance, financial transfer, and others, as well as others that affect their interests. In Group 6, this includes the damages to production and services due to the impossibility of accessing technical information and technologies of U.S. origin that are more efficient, less consuming of raw material or energy, with higher yields or more competitive. Lastly, in Group 7, they assess the consequences of the U.S. government's policies of encouraging desertion and immigration of Cuban citizens in order to deprive the country of professionals and technicians, which clearly hinders our development. Generally speaking, this is a complex methodology, which there's the participation of many organizations of the state and government, but I can tell you that it's done with full responsibility and in full adherence to the law by the national institution involved. Nevertheless, I want to mention, esteemed participant, that this methodology does not allow us to be able to estimate the human damage that the policy of blockade carries out, those to human families, though the Cuban families that are inside Cuba, outside, the nationals of other countries, the daily life. This is impossible to calculate. You would have to be in Cuba to feel the impact of the measures of a context because of arbitrary inclusion of Cuba from the states that allegedly sponsor terrorism. I want to take this opportunity to tell you that more than 80% of the Cuban population only knows a blocked and besieged Cuba. Most Cubans only know a blocked Cuba, so this gives you an idea of the huge impact to our population. And to finish off, I want to thank once again Madam Rapporteur for all her work to make visible the impact of the unilateral coercive measures in the enjoyment of all human rights. I congratulate you and I thank you for calling to us to share these elements, and I remain at your disposal to answer any questions that you deem appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Indeed, Cuba is under unilateral sanctions for longer than 60 years, and it has to do a monitoring of the impact. And naturally, at the point, the mandate is also involved in the process of the development of the uniform methodology to monitor and assess the impact of sanctions. My presentation today will be extremely practical. I will not address in details what type of unilateral sanctions are affecting what group of human rights more. It's reflected in depth in the report which was presented a week ago. At the same time, we need to admit that today we are not assessing the impact of specific sanctions only. We're assessing the comprehensive impact of all types of unilateral sanctions, means of the enforcement and over-compliance with these unilateral sanctions, because it's not possible to differentiate between the impacts of each of the groups. So therefore, I have to admit that today, despite the broad discussion whether the sanctions have impact, do not have impact, what impact they have, there is no uniform methodology. Despite the efforts which have been done by OCHA in 2004 to assess the impact of sanctions of the UN Security Council on Iraq, no other methodology has been developed by any other UN organ until now. And that's why for us, the development of the methodology was like a challenge to be accomplished during this mandate, to have the facts and the evidences and to be able to assess the impacts and demonstrate real impacts, enabling the victims of these violations for redress and for the responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, I have to admit the development of the monitoring methodology raises a number of serious problems, which shall be addressed and which we tried to address. In particular, it was hard to identify the indicators, the sources of information. We had to differentiate between the impact of sanctions as well as other factors which definitely exist, like the pandemic, for example, put severe challenges on promotion and protection of human rights. We also have to distinguish between the impact of certain types of sanctions or those of over-compliance, because countries which impose unilateral sanctions reject the responsibility for the fact of over-compliance. And also we had to identify the means of calculation and assessment of the results to ensure the accuracy of the results we get. Well, for the last 2 years, I sent 3 calls for contributions and organized 3 expert consultations with different groups of stakeholders to identify at least the main indicators and choose the way we will continue with the development of the methodology. Today, I will try to demonstrate the outcome of our efforts, and naturally there is still a way for improvement, but I'm happy to say that it looks like we managed to do something, and I will be happy to propose that tool. I need to say that one of the challenges which are faced today for the purposes of the monitoring is the fact that the issue of the unilateral sanctions and their consequences is not included in the agenda of the majority of the UN specialized agencies, organs, and bodies. And therefore, when they provide for certain statistics, which also is relevant to indicators what we have now and which we use for the monitoring tool, they do not assess sanctions as a factor influencing the figures, the decrease or increase of figures, depending on their political, depending on their meaning. So the purpose is to have the methodology which will provide for the possibility to see how indicators were changing after unilateral sanctions have been introduced, eased, or otherwise enhanced, and how situation develops every year. So I'm happy to present the result of the research, and the tool for monitoring and assessment is finally developed, and I'm happy to, I will ask our IT colleagues to help us. I'm sure that the people on WebEx shall also see it. So basically, we already have a web page of the tool. And this web page of the tool is an online application today, and not everything is fully functioning yet, but we are in the process to fixing the gaps. Anyway, the tool already exists. The tool can be accessed separately, or it's possible to access the tool from the web page of the mandate. In the sanctions monitoring and impact assessment, there is a direct link to the tool, and there is a direct link to the survey, which helped us to collect all information. The architecture of this monitoring tool consists of 3 main parts: collecting information, verifying information, and providing the visualized reports concerning the information we collected. The first part is a survey tool. Information for that can be submitted online. The important feature for that it's open to be filled by any actor. And that's why it's so important that all possible actors, non-governmental organizations, humanitarian, international, or national organizations, which often complain that their voices and information they want to share is not heard, can fill the tool. So it provides for the information submitted will be kept fully confidential. It's only for the staff team of the mandate who will be able to see who exactly submitted what type of information. There is a possibility to identify so the person shall identify him or herself. Certain measures are taken to make sure that it's not the artificial bot, but rather a living human being. After the person has registered, the next part is done upon request of non-governmental organizations to make it user-friendly. So to avoid filling and looking through multiple pages, there is a possibility to choose the group of interest or block of interest or several blocks of interest. So the person is able to click at several issues, and it's not only specific blocks of human rights, it also includes, for example, the effect on vulnerable group. Therefore, if NGO, for example, is working with children, it's possible to address the issue of children. If the NGO is working, for example, with persons with disability, there is also an option. And take into account that many humanitarian organizations have reported that they face serious challenges in delivering humanitarian assistance and doing their humanitarian work, there is a specific block for delivery of humanitarian assistance. Then after we select a specific block, we get the questions. So the questions are not only yes or no questions, or some questions provide for the possibility to fill a figure. If you press yes, you get additional questions. So it's an open space questions, and it's possible to provide detailed information about the impediments or the challenges which demonstrate the effect of unilateral sanctions. So the purpose of this instrument is not only to have figures, not only to have statistics, but to analyze and assess main challenges and the main consequences of the use of unilateral sanctions and means of overcompliance. To make it easy for users, if, for example, the user is selecting a few points, so a few blocks, the questions which have already been filled will be removed from the other blocks, so that because the information has already been provided. After we get many surveys, we come to the second part of our instrument, and the second part is the web application, including a database allowing only the personnel of the mandate to enter and summarize the data and to download the report. So the part which we'll show today now is for internal use only. So it will not be accessed externally, and moreover, we will make sure that it's secure and the confidential information will not be leaked. The part which will be shown now is not real. It was created by staff just to demonstrate the capacity of the database in order not to prevent the leaking of any confidential data. So basically, this is a part done by the staff. So we filled some of these surveys, and the person assessing the impact of sanctions see the list, who has submitted, what submissions we have at hand. After responses, we are able to see the data, what we have. The data might be different. So the first option is, for example, when we have a data and the person just identified yes or no, or provided certain figures without any explanation on the point. However, the next figure will be with explanations. So it's not only the figures and yes or no answers, but it's also the reasons or the challenges or specific examples identified by the person who submitted the information. To make sure that we provide and we assess information in the accurate way, there is no possibility for the staff member to amend that inside. So everything what has been submitted is received and analyzed. Moreover, taking into account that the purpose of the database is to collect information from all possible places, and as I have mentioned, many databases done by the specialized agencies reflect and have statistics on the indicators, there is a possibility for the staff of the mandate also to create the same pages, filling there and copying the information from for example, from the reports of the WHO when we talk about the health issues, or from the reports of ILO or any other organization. After we have all information submitted and all copied from the profiles or from the information done by specialized bodies, we get the aggregated country survey. Again, the country will be selected just as an example. So for this aggregated survey, we will be able to see this statistical data. Then we are moving to the third part of the tool, which is aimed to ensure the visibility of the results of monitoring undertaken through the internal application. The visualization format is an independent web interface allowing any interested stakeholder to assess the country-specific statistics on the negative impact of unilateral sanctions and overcompliance on the enjoyment of human rights. We use different colors to identify countries directly affected by unilateral sanctions, countries which are imposing sanctions. And basically, this will provide the information not only as concerned the sanctions imposed on specific countries, but also, for example, it's possible to choose a country which imposes sanctions and to identify what countries are affected. And vice versa, to choose the country which is affected by sanctions and to identify what countries have imposed sanctions as concerns this country. Moreover, when we move further, also the database provides for the possibility to assess the impact of the sanctions on the third countries which are not directed by unilateral sanctions. The visualization tool is also providing for the possibility to see the statistics relevant to the humanitarian impact of unilateral sanctions in the format of visualized diagrams and in the format of the statistical table data. So far, we managed to have the diagrams relevant to 7 main indicators. However, we will finalize this work until the end of the year and will have reflections as concerns all indicators, including in the database. So the statistical data from the interactive table is used in 5 types of diagrams on the effects of UCMs and overcompliance. And at the very end, we will cover all elements. Moreover, it's planned to be able to demonstrate how every indicator, how the data on every indicator has been changing since the moment before sanctions were imposed, what was the impact of strengthening of sanctions or decreasing the sanctioning pressure, and how it is it changing on everyday basis. Also, the interactive charts allow to see country statistics in different forms and to select a specific country. Well, the current version of the web interface is primarily based on the data received through the preliminary monitoring efforts, and that's basically the data which have been attached as an annex to the report which I presented to the Human Rights Council last Friday. At the same time, when we are planning to have real developments. So here you see on your screen the data which is reflecting the tabular format of data. This tabular format of data, unlike the diagram data, provides us with the possibility to see not only how statistics is changing, but also to identify the reasons, challenges, and the most frequent cases. So it will be the most important to identify the root causes, the main challenges, and to be able to address these root causes and challenges. At the current point, the information is only collected and available as concerns the countries which are directly affected by unilateral sanctions. However, the purpose is to continue and to collect information as concerns every country, because the neighborhood and regional effect of unilateral sanctions is increasing incredibly and very fast, unfortunately. I will just need to mention that at the current moment, we are still working on improving the situation. So in the very short term, I mean, until the end of the year, we plan to finalize the tool to have the diagrams and information available as concerns all indicators. We will continue to work to provide information on the impact of sanctions, means of sanctions enforcement and overcompliance as concerns all groups of states. Moreover, we plan to finalize the migration of the unverified data to the public network. At the same time, I need to mention that today we already have the survey functioning, so it's already possible to submit information. From the technical perspective, the mandate will continue to do the work. At the same time, it's just the first version and the amendments of the instrument can be discussed. So therefore, I would really appreciate if the information about this monitoring tool is distributed as broadly as only possible, not only among countries, but also among non-governmental organizations and research institutions to make sure that they know about that they know about the possibility to submit information. So the survey is already functionable. So we are ready to start collecting information since today. So therefore, I would appreciate sending a message to non-governmental and research institutions, and as well, starting from the next year, all the countries providing information to make this instrument functionable. Via that verification, upon my opinion, we will be able to get data and to ensure that when we use the evidence-based approach when talking about unilateral sanctions. So by joint efforts, we'll be able to ensure that we have data which will provide us with the possibility to start the discussion about remedies, responsibility, redress, and compensations for those who have been affected by sanctions. Thank you very much. And now I would be happy to give the floor to anyone from the ground who wants to take the floor, might have any questions. So first, as a first one, I'm happy to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador of Syria.
Yeah, this is good.
Thank you, Madam Special Rapporteur, for convening this timely and important side event. And allow me to commend once again the effort you and your team are exerting to fulfill your mandate. I also would like to thank the panelists for the comprehensive and valuable presentation. Syria stands with the government and people, with Cuba and Venezuela, and will always support you. Madam Special Rapporteur, we welcome convening this side event, which provides the opportunity to have a better knowledge about the monitoring tool. This project, which we hope will receive full support, to be a means of achieving progress in detecting the human rights and humanitarian consequences of these measures and bridging the current gap in this area. Our position on the impact of this measure is very well known. Yesterday, at the exhibition organized by the esteemed Permanent Mission of Venezuela, we had the opportunity to see more undeniable facts and figures in this regard. We affirm our continued engagement in discussion related to this project and discussing the means of putting it into effect and applying it in the best way that serves its purpose, which is to reveal the facts that have long been denied by the countries imposing such measures. We also welcome the important and inspiring national experience of both Venezuela and Cuba in this area, and we congratulate them on this important work, which indeed can be considered good practices that should be followed in all targeted countries and be discussed among their national monitoring bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now I'm giving the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Special Rapporteur, distinguished panelists, colleagues, Madam Special Rapporteur. First of all, would like to thank you for organizing this side event and for presenting the tool. We would like to reiterate that the Russian Federation, being a co-sponsor of the respective Human Rights Council resolution, fully supports the mandate of the Special Rapporteur, her activities and initiatives. Our delegation stands among traditional co-sponsors of the Human Rights Council resolutions on UCMs. Russia strongly sticks to its principal position that UCMs are illegitimate, unjustified, and inhuman. They contradict by their very nature the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and international law. We thank Dr. Dovgany for her recent initiative related to the monitoring and assessment of the negative impact of UCMs and our compliance on human rights. The Special Rapporteur has been developing very relevant methodology and monitoring tool in this regard. At the same time, we regret that UN entities and country teams have not been very responsive to the Special Rapporteur's calls for contributions, despite the fact that in principle they collect and assess data based on similar indicators. We believe that it is crucial to collect precise statistics in order to identify UCM's specific impact on enjoyment of human rights and to adequately address violations at the latter. We agree with Dr. Dovgin that such steps should be taken at the UN level. In this regard, we strongly support Dr. Dovgin's initiative and call upon the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to assist the Special Rapporteur in finalizing the development of the methodology and creation of the online monitoring tool application. I thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Russian Federation, and now I'm giving the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Foro.
Thank you, Madam Dohan, for convening this side event. I would also like to thank His Excellency William of Venezuela and Ambassador Juan of Cuba for their insightful presentation and sharing with us their national experiences with regard to mitigating the negative impacts of UCM. I join other colleagues in commending you in your continuous efforts to create and bring new tools in order to bring international condemnation for UCM and in order to promote the accountability mechanisms for the perpetrators of unilateral coercive measures. Listening to your presentation about the tool, I would like to share with you two important observations. The first is about your confirmation that there should be an engagement of international adjudication to ensure accountability and redress in sanctions cases. And definitely UCM and sanctions are a clear example of committing a crime against humanity, and everything should be done in order to promote the international accountability mechanisms. In this regard, I would like to refer to some challenges. For example, in the case of Venezuela's 2020 referral to the International Criminal Court under Article 14 of the Rome Statute, citing the adverse effects of UCM, unfortunately, after 4 years, there hasn't been significant progress in this case in holding the perpetrators of sanctions accountable. The second case is about the case Iran made in ICJ, the case known as certain Iranian assets, Iran versus United States. In this case, although ICJ recognized that the sanctions imposed by United States are against and violating the amity treaty between Iran and United States, but ICJ refused to announce clearly and explicitly that sanctions are illegal. And to tell you another example, in Iran's experience in challenging European sanctions, despite achieving success in overturning sanctions in 73% of cases in initial courts and 60% cases in appeals, but only 32% of those successes resulted in permanent lifting of sanctions. And the European Council, unfortunately, has, through alternative justifications, reimposed sanctions in many cases in which the Iranian entities have been able to get a rule in European courts. This is a challenge, and the question is that how the monitoring tool will develop the international accountability for sanctions. And the second point I would like to share with you is the importance of the principle that has been reaffirmed by yourself about the importance and necessity of involvement of the United Nations and other international organizations in implementing and operating this tool, because without their cooperation and without their involvement, it is almost impossible to operate this mechanism, and we need that they should be involved and engaged in the operation, and therefore we should do whatever we can to convince particularly the Office of the High Commissioner to be involved in the operation of the tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now I'm giving the floor to the representative of China. I would just appreciate if you stay within 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to reply. First of all, I would like to join the previous speakers to join the Madam Special Rapporteur and Vice Minister of Venezuela and then Distinguished Ambassador of Cuba for joining this side event. I believe this is very useful, especially when you, Madam Special Rapporteur, introduced the tool. It is very encouraging. We see the tool is developed to be user-friendly, credible, and especially very illustrative. So we believe this tool is going to provide the full picture and the root cause and other necessary information for us to understand unilateral coercive measures. This made us to believe that we are in the right hand. China would like to continue to support the mandate of Special Rapporteur and support the establishment of this kind of platform, especially. As everybody knows, that China is a victim of unilateral coercive measures. We have always called on the international community to jointly oppose UCMs. Unfortunately, the US and some other countries have vigorously engaged in power politics, exercise long arms jurisdiction, and violate the international law and human rights in other countries. However, we believe that probably we don't have we still lack a full picture because UCM are very far-reaching, and we don't know the full picture of how deep and how far these kind of measures affects us. I don't want to elaborate more here, but we are really concerned of the current lack of a tool to effectively monitor and assess the harmfulness of UCMs. So it's very reassuring to see that now with the relentless effort of Madam Special Rapporteur, a monitoring platform is going to be established. We see that it still lacks of enough attention and support, but with side events like this, I think we are on the right track. So at the end, we would like to call on all parties to support Madam Special Rapporteur's effort in carrying out her duty and push forward this project. And we would like to see the day that unilateral coercive measures ends and does not affect human rights anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do not see any requests for the floor from the side of the states, and I'm able to give the floor to one. Andrew requested the floor for 1 minute maximum because we are very short.
Speak and thank you for your presentation. I'm Nisha Pires from Association Culturelle et Tamoul en France. I want to give a small remark regarding the situation of UCM towards nations who are seeking for their rights to self-determination imposed by countries. In a world where the definitions of human feelings and the definition of humanity itself is compromised by financial and egoistic, individualistic approaches, how can we understand your mandate? Because when we speak about unilateral coercive measures and its impact, negative impacts, it applies to the member states. But what about the impacts of unilateral measures that some states are imposing on freedom fighters or on some movements who are fighting for their civil and political rights that prevent even the human rights activists like us to fight for the very principles of Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Is there any chance for you to prepare a report on the situation of nations who face UCM from countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm happy to give the floor to our respected panelists, but also would appreciate you to be very brief as possible. Your Excellency.
Gracias.
Thank you.
A la doctora Elena Du.
Just to thank Dr. Elena Duhan and Excellencies Ambassadors and those here in this event to reaffirm the commitment of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in the international investigation and in the political multilateral cooperation to move forward in this technical analytic instruments to move to a world without sanctions and without unilateral coercive measures. We will continue supporting all the initiatives that go to this regard. Thank you.
And I'm happy to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador of Cuba.
Thank you very much, Rapporteur. Just quickly, I just wanted to highlight the value and the use of this platform and tool that you have just presented on our behalf. We believe that it's a tool that is very useful for the future, and on our side, we're going to actively contribute to make it visible from our experience and with all the information that we have at hand on the impact of the blockade to Cuba. We're going to contribute to provide information and nourish this platform so they can have a largest scope, not only for the international states of community, but also for academic researchers, university students that I'm sure will use this platform as a way of investigating and research for great value. So thank you very much, and we are at your disposition to continue exchanging in this regard.
I will say just a few words. So first of all, I would like to thank the countries for the support of the initiative and the efforts to make it to come to reality, because eventually we have to invent everything from zero. That's why I would really appreciate that if we get a feedback to this platform. So it's still to be developed, and it shall be developed and improved. So therefore, if it's tested and if we get a feedback as concerned the rights, which shall be additionally addressed. And I appreciate very much the reference of His Excellency Ambassador of Iran to the rights to the access to justice. I will present the report on the access to justice to the General Assembly this year, but the access to justice is still not here. I do not know whether we shall add it or not. Shall we add additionally cultural rights? So this information is the one which I can get only from you and from non-governmental actors as well. So the mandate is open to receive this information. We will proceed in developing a standard stable methodology as an instrument, and also will be happy if we get your support. And I really hope that the UN organs will get engaged more and more in this area. And to finish that, I just want to mention that to invent and to develop that, we had to do it with very, very limited team. Therefore, I would like to thank my team who collected all the information mostly by hand. And I would like to thank the UNIT part who helped us to develop all the programming to make sure that we finally have a tool, not just the idea of the monitoring. Thank you very much for coming, and wish all of you a nice day.